From today, machetes will be completely banned in Victoria. The state government-imposed ban means owning, carrying, buying or selling a machete without a valid exemption is a criminal offence.
Hello, I'm Linton Besser. Welcome to Media Watch. And tonight, the crime wave gripping the Garden State and the Victorian government's novel means by which to wrestle it under control.
A purpose-built bin for a weapon wreaking havoc. And this is where Victorians are being asked to drop them off during an amnesty period that will run until November 30.
Victoria's media has been obsessed by these bins for weeks, querying rightly just how effective they'll be and rather curious about their price tag. And after much speculation on social media, this slick bit of self-promotion from a Liberal Party backbencher added fuel to the fire.
This genius machete bin scheme is costing taxpayers $13 million for just 40 bins. So what? Are they $325,000 a bin?
That startling question, leapt upon by 3AW's Jackie Felgate, helped get the ball rolling.
So what are we talking, like 300 and something grand a bin?
Yes, if you do the maths on it, $13 million for 40 bins, that's $325,000 and something you could buy a Ferrari with that.
6 days later, Seven was so hot and bothered about these big-ticket bins, it dispatched a reporter to the front line.
Bins which have been put in place at 44 police stations across Victoria to the tune of $13 million of taxpayers' money. So that's $300,000 each.
They even occupied those ageing footballers over on SEN.
You tell us how you can get a steel box worth $325,000. Just tell us.
Yeah. Except within days, the Herald Sun began pouring cold water over the number, reporting a much lower figure of just $110,000 for 45 bins, which works out at under a measly $2.5K per bin. The Ferrari of bins is just so much more fun. As might be obvious, the bulk of the $13 million amnesty program is not the cost of the bins, but the wider cost of the policy, including publicity of the ban and disposal of the knives. So what excuse did 7 News have more than a week later to flirt with the figure yet again?
The whole scheme costing the taxpayer $13 million or $325,000 a bin.
The Victorian government wanted answers too. Aggrieved by the broadcast, one media minder texted Seven to demand a correction.
We would like the story taken down offline given it's inaccurate and an on-air retraction.
And how did Seven respond? With some refreshing clarity.
It's 13 million divided by 40. Of course each bin doesn't cost that much, but it's the equivalent of 325,000 each bin. It's widely reported that way. Our news boss wanted that information in.
But the next day, lo and behold, Seven had shaved $322,600 off the price of each bin.
The state government has spent $13 million of taxpayers' money on the scheme, including for 45 safe disposal bins at police stations across the state at a cost of $2,500 each.
Seven's news director told Media Watch,
"While we appreciate the government requested a takedown because it didn't fit with their messaging, we are not a publicity machine for them and can do our own maths. The state government should perhaps consider an advertising package. We can pass on contacts in our sales team."
Meanwhile, radio station 3AW told us it did mention other costs of the amnesty program and invited the Premier and Police Minister to explain the breakdown themselves, an offer they declined. It's all rather beside the point though, because the $300,000 bin is just too savoury a scandal to die.
$325K. Not for all 40, for one.
Bins that are costing 325 grand each that aren't going to get used, by the way.
You cannot possibly tell me that machete bin costs 320. Has that been checked?
Yes, Ross, it has. Call me old-fashioned, but I do wonder what happened to checking such things before you go on air. And now to a cheery development for the Albanese government earlier this month in its world-first attempt to block kids from social media.
Technology designed to check the age of social media users is effective. A government-backed trial has concluded.
The report found that age assurance for social media use in Australia could be done privately, efficiently and effectively.
The nation's newspapers earnestly reporting a much-anticipated government-backed review of the technology that might be used to stop children logging into those nefarious social media platforms, with good news all round.
Communications Minister Annika Wells said,
The Albanese government is on the side of families.
The report did identify important caveats, which several reporters were careful to include, like the potential for privacy breaches. But doesn't so complex a review into so complex a policy require the analysis of independent experts? Strangely, there was none in any of these stories. It was a similar case back in September 2024 when the Albanese government first revealed its plan to legislate a social media ban.
The Prime Minister on Tuesday will commit to introducing world-leading legislation to protect children from digital harm.
Yet again, in these stories, there was no quoting of dissenting voices, no quoting of interest groups, and no quoting of technical experts. And why might that be? Maybe because the formidable parliamentary press gallery was told it wasn't permitted to do so. And from whom did these marching orders come? Would you believe it? The government itself.
Hi everyone. Tomorrow the Prime Minister will announce the Albanese government will introduce legislation this term to enforce a minimum age for access to social media.
Strictly embargoed until 10:30 p.m. No third-party comment.
Which means no one else is to be quoted. Fast forward 11 months when the PM decided YouTube deserved to be banned too, another friendly missive arrived in press gallery mailboxes from on high.
Under embargo, with no third party or opposition comment until 10:30 p.m.
Strictly, no third party or opposition comment.
That's right, no comments except for those from Dear Leader and his commissar. Then, 8 days ago, another Labor spinner came along to feed the chooks.
The trial report reveals age assurance is practical and achievable.
Strictly embargoed with no third-party contact.
This bizarre arrangement, journalists agreeing to restrict their reporting in return for a so-called drop, dates back decades. Consecutive governments seeking to exploit their monopoly on information to further their own agenda, hoping their unfiltered message will be reprinted and then picked up by radio and TV. And as a shrinking press gallery has shed its policy specialists and the news cycle grown more frenetic, so the power imbalance has grown. But frustrated journos tell us it's only been in the past year that spinners feel so emboldened as to routinely put the no third-party diktat in writing. And it's not confined to Labor. Here's a drop from the Dutton campaign back in April.
Strictly embargoed, with no third-party comments.
In just that month, with the election bearing down, the drops from both sides turned into a rushing river of handouts about the Port of Darwin, home batteries, community language schools, penalty rates and domestic violence, all of which prohibited too much journalism from pesky reporters. There are plenty of real grenades set off by the Canberra Press Gallery and occasions on which the ban is ignored or even called out, like this blue ribbon effort by the Australian Financial Review, which alerted readers to the ruse.
The announcement prohibited journalists from contacting the opposition or third parties ahead of its release.
But in no other field of serious journalism would such an instruction be deemed tolerable. Even the doyen of the dark arts of media management, Sue Cato, despaired.
If you tried that outside the Canberra bubble, you could expect journos to tell you to self-procreate. My first response is, if you want to dictate a story, buy an ad.
Several big hitters in the Canberra Press Gallery have told us it's time for the convention to cease, including Peter Harcher, who said ministers making such demands
are conspiring to degrade news and journalism. They should stop. If they don't, reporters should ignore this unethical constraint and remember that their main responsibility is to their readers, viewers and listeners, not their sources.
President of the Press Gallery, the ABC's Jane Norman, said the no third-party comment demand by politicians and interest groups is an attempt to
control their media coverage, to shape or frame the first take of a story without the possibility of experts or critics weighing in.
She said the restriction creates a dilemma for the media in
having to decide whether the public interest in an embargo drop outweighs the necessity, at least in the first instance, to include other perspectives.
The Australian Financial Review's political editor, Phil Curry, says he writes context and the reaction he anticipates to an announcement into his stories as a kind of workaround, and that to not report these drops at all would often be a disservice to his readers.
Clearly, we would all prefer if no such demands were placed on drops, but that's the prerogative of the dropper. At the end of the day, we're not forced to write it.
This April drop, publicising a mental health program, resulted in news stories arrayed across the ABC, Nine and News Corp. But hold on, what's this? Third-party comments?
Mental Health Australia Chief Executive Carolyn Nikolowski described it as a
landmark investment that recognises the challenges the community is facing.
Former Australian of the Year Patrick McGorry said,
all Australians will deeply appreciate this groundbreaking commitment.
No, don't get up. These were only simulacra of the real thing, because those quotes were not the product of actual phone calls by reporters, but were, of course, supplied by the generous souls who staff Albo's office. But don't think for a minute anyone else was allowed to be interviewed.
No additional third-party comment.
We sought advice about the practice from the editors of most major mastheads in this country, and not a one put their head above the parapet. The opposition also declined to comment, and an advisor to the Prime Minister told us,
we have the utmost respect for the Federal Press Gallery, which is why we work with them constructively on a daily basis.
Constructively being one way to put it. At a time when it's seeking to water down the Federal Freedom of Information Act, this is a terrible look for the Albanese government. But it's an even worse look for the Press Gallery, and we believe its members should refuse these shabby deals that tend to benefit not audiences, but the very centre of power those same journalists are there to scrutinise. To shrug and say, well, it's just the way things are, is to walk ever further down a path that cedes ever more authority and risks betraying an already frayed compact with readers. And now, to the secret anxiety coursing through the veins of our younger viewers, which was unveiled finally last week.
So a new study has revealed that nearly 2/3 of Gen Z drivers are actually scared of filling up their cars. Not because of safety, not because of the price, but actually just refuel anxiety.
I beg your pardon?
It's all about image, right? So social media has created this world where if you don't get a certain amount of likes, I'm going to delete my post. People don't like me. People comment on how I look. So they're going in there, are people looking at me? Am I doing it right?
Hear that? It's the sound of Sigmund Freud rolling in his grave. But the psychiatrists over on Nine deemed it serious enough to circulate a public alert over breakfast.
Well, it's not the cost of fuel that's concerning young people, but the simple act of filling up their car. That is now making them feel awkward.
But surely not as awkward as all of us at home, forced to consume more of this story as Nine crossed live to its correspondent.
They're concerned whether they look like an amateur holding the nozzle.
Over on Sky, the Benjamin Button of late-night TV thought it worth his time too.
They're worried about pulling into the servo and taking off the fuel cap and pulling the nozzle out of the Bowser and putting it in the car and putting fuel in their car.
With fellow traveller Freya Leach revealing the petrol plague had broken containment lines.
But it's not just young people, it's everyone. There is an epidemic of fuel anxiety in the Western world.
So, which esteemed establishment conducted this research? A British outfit called Kazoo, which is not a research institute, but a company that sells used cars in the UK, and which dished up this tripe in a bid to flog more of them. Or, as Sunrise put it,
according to a study by a British car retailer,
which nonetheless did nothing at all to dampen the desires of Antipodean television producers, themselves anxious to fill hours of live TV with, clearly, whatever's laying about. Like the survey we're going to conduct of people's cortisol levels when they're forced to watch flapdoodle like this. And that's all from us tonight. Be sure to check us out on ABC iView, as well as YouTube, Facebook and X. You can find full statements on our website, and don't forget to send us your tips. I'll see you next week.